All right, so last week, Vice President Kamala Harris blasted the state of Florida after it showed the this report that comes out in terms of this language they're using describing how slavery, those who were enslaved in slavery somehow use those skills later for their personal benefit. A lot of people have been ripping Florida for this. Now, one of the people who's on this education task force is a state representative in Florida named Kimberly Daniels. Now, after this came out, these past comments she made came to light. And again, she's on the Florida African American History Task Force. Now, she's a Christian pastor, and she made these statements about the LGBT community and slavery in a 2008 sermon. Hear this BS.
But the Jews own everything. I thank God for slavery. I thank God for the crack house. If it wasn't for the crack house, come on somebody, God wouldn't have never been able to use me how he can use me now. And if it wasn't for slavery, I might be somewhere in Africa worshiping a tree.
Run that back.
And talk about the Holocaust, but the Jews own everything. I thank God for slavery. I thank God for the crack house. If it wasn't for the crack house, come on somebody, God wouldn't have never been able to use me how he can use me now. And if it wasn't for slavery, I might be somewhere in Africa worshiping a tree.
Run that back one more time.
But the Jews own everything. I thank God for slavery. I thank God for the crack house. If it wasn't for the crack house, come on somebody, God wouldn't have never been able to use me how he can use me now. And if it wasn't for slavery, I might be somewhere in Africa worshiping a tree.
You know, Anthony, I'm walking to that side of the studio because I can't even sit down. Let me go. So, y'all, this woman is a so-called Christian pastor. So this woman stands in front of her congregation and she says literally about one of the dumbest things I've ever heard somebody say before. So let me deal with this from several vantage points. First and foremost, anytime you hear somebody who is a Christian pastor, anytime you hear one of them say something so stupid and idiotic as, if I was in Africa, I would be worshiping a tree, has simply no understanding of faith and religion that emanated from the motherland. First and foremost, anybody who is actually taking the time to study religion understand that Africans had an appreciation for all of God's creation, which meant that those Africans that were on the continent, they did appreciate a tree because it was a creation of God. They appreciated grass. They appreciated water. They appreciated birds. They appreciated everything that existed, because what they said was, all of this is a manifestation of God. Now, if you are a so-called preacher, Kim Daniels, then clearly you have no understanding of that, because winds, sky, water, all of this, when one is reading Genesis, understands what God created. And then, well, if I were here, I would be worshiping a tree. Can you please show me where in your theological training that came from? In fact, y'all look up for a second the bio of Kim Daniels. Let's just make sure she even went to theology school. Because see, that's really part of the problem with a whole bunch of these folk. A whole bunch of them are bootleg preachers. A whole bunch of them have no real training, no real study. So they stand in front of some folk who themselves don't know and say some of the wildest and craziest and outrageous and nonsensical things. And then they simply wrap Jesus and the blood in it and then present it as if somehow it is righteous, when in fact it's simply stupid. So, okay, so she has a doctorate in what? In Christian counseling from the unaccredited Jacksonville Theological Seminary. Okay, and here's the deal. Just because you got a and look, there are some unaccredited schools where you could actually learn some things, but that's a doctorate in Christian counseling. Girl, why you preaching? See, I'm gonna tell y'all something right now. I ain't got a problem saying it, and it's a whole bunch of preachers gonna agree with me. It's a whole bunch of people in America preaching behind pulpits who ain't got no business preaching. When I say no business preaching, I mean literally no business being behind a pulpit. They ain't got no gifting to actually preach. And so what we now are dealing with, and so when you hear this, oh, thank God for slavery. Thank God for slavery. So you actually if it wasn't for slavery, I would be worshiping a tree. So, Kim Daniels, you actually trying to tell me that the pain and the agony and the torture that black people endured was worth it because your silly ass would be worshiping a tree? This is the same white Christianity that was used to justify slavery. These are the same. See, we ain't talking John Brown Christians. No. We're talking hate-filled, racist murderers who use the name of Jesus to justify their actions. And it's stupid people like you, Kim Daniels, that makes such comments. See, whenever I hear people say these things, ooh, thank God for slavery, thank God that we are here, thank God that we went through this. Those are the same people who never could use their minds and actually say, I wonder what the continent of Africa would look like today had white racists not colonized it. I wonder what the continent would look like today had the English not raped and pillaged the continent. I wonder what the continent today would look like if King Leopold had not killed millions of black folks in the Congo and shipped the billions of resources from there to Belgium. I wonder what the continent would look like had there not been the Berlin Conference, when these same white folks sat together in the 1800s and then said, we are going to now split up the continent of Africa, and y'all get this piece, and y'all get this piece, and y'all get this piece, and then we are going to rule and control the largest continent in the world, and we are going to again strip it of its billions and trillions of dollars of assets. I wonder what the world would look like in 2023. Would you have had the wars? Would you have had the degradation? Would you have had the killing? Would you have had any of that? Because see, Kim, if you are a real Christian, Kim, you would not have been so stupid and idiotic in making that comment, because Kim had real Christians believed in Jesus, they would have been abolitionists and never allowed the institution of slavery to be created in this country. But we also know that it was the institution of slavery that provided the economic resources for 13 colonies to be able to survive, because were it not for the enslaved people of African descent, yo silly dumbass, the 13 colonies likely would have perished. So you are talking about, well, thank God for slavery. Well, I would have been worshiping a tree. Well, hell, baby, without slavery, the question is, would this country even exist in its present form? And anybody examining the record could recognize that if it wasn't for free labor for 243 years, and then another 10 to 12 years of Reconstruction, and then essentially free labor for 92 years of Jim Crow, essentially from 1619 to 1970, and I can tack on the last 53 years, America would not be America were it not for enslaved people. So I would hope that if you are a parishioner of Kim Daniels, you would have jumped up and walked the hell out when that fool made that comment. Because one, it is historically inaccurate. She clearly could not offer any proper exegesis of the text, because what she said was simply biblically unsound and theologically inept. And this is the person who Ron DeSantis put on this task force. No shock. No shock at all. Let me go to panel. Omakongo, your thoughts on this fool?
Wow, where to start? This is why I wrote the book Lies About Black People, because, so many times we as Black people ourselves believe the lies about our own inferiority. When we talk about African societies, we have to understand that the concept of the Holy Trinity came from Africa. The Greek names were Isis, Osiris, and Horus, but they were also known as Oser, Set, and Heru. That's where the original cross came from the Egyptian Ankh. When I was in undergrad at Georgetown, my final paper was on the religious and linguistic similarities between ancient Africans and contemporary traditional Africans. So this idea that Africans didn't have monotheistic gods and beliefs is just complete fallacy. My dad, who was a reverend, got his PhD from Harvard Divinity School and wrote the paper in the 70s that fundamentally transformed the school that led to the hiring of the first Black dean. And at Harvard Divinity School, he talked often about African spiritual and religious beliefs. So the facts are clear. And so that's that aspect of it. Now coming to her current ignorance, the fact of the matter is that she's billed as a Democrat. So people can say that his committee now is bipartisan. This is a woman who's part of this educational committee that I can't find any other educators on of the 6 new people who were placed on this committee. And so the other ones who were placed on it are more extreme than she is. One of these guys who wasn't an educator was like the head of the Florida lottery. So these are the people, the Black faces that Ron DeSantis is putting in front of people to say that I got Black people working on this. I got Black people doing this. And if they are saying this, then there can't be a problem with it. If they are saying that people benefited from slavery, then there can't be a problem with it. The fact of the matter is we didn't learn skills here being enslaved. We already had the skills, which is why they brought us here in the first place. So at the end of the day, what DeSantis is doing is evil, it's scary, and throughout history, as we all know on this panel, they can always find Black faces to support their ignorance and destruction of Black culture, and she's the latest and most embarrassing example of it.
The thing here, Renita, that really trips me out. Again, when we're talking about a task force on education, a task force that dealing with African-American history, I don't understand this desire to have folk who literally have no expertise, no knowledge in any of this. She's a graduate of Fla.State University, where she obtained a bachelor's degree in criminology, master's degree in Christian education, and doctorate in Christian counseling from Jacksonville Theological Seminary. Okay, all right. So you go through all of this. Why are you on a task force dealing with education?
Oh, I absolutely understand it. She is not on the task force because of her background or her credentials. She is on the task force because she is willing to advance white supremacy. She is willing to say what they want her to say and to be a cover for what Florida is doing. And not only Florida, but other states as well have changed the way curriculum looks. And so that's what her qualification is, that she's willing to go along with the foolishness and actually justify the foolishness. Not only is she using Christianity to advance white supremacy, but she's also using Christianity to justify anti-Blackness. I took her comments around she would still be in Africa worshiping a tree really to promote and endorse stereotypes about African people. That's the way I took it. I understand that, a few others were saying that she was critiquing African religion, but I think that she is really just somebody who endorses and promotes stereotypes about African people, which, many people are working to undo these harmful stereotypes that Americans in particular have really held about what it's like to live in Africa, Africans, and African history. So she's got the most important credential that they want her to have, which is willing to endorse and go along and promote the foolishness.
Because, again, anybody, Julian, who, again, has studied will realize there is a difference between, first of all, let's be perfectly clear. If we're talking about Jesus and the ministry of Jesus and the ministry of Jesus, it was not called Christianity. Anybody understands that? Peter was deemed in many ways, the first pope of the Catholic Church. Christianity was a creation after Jesus died, was killed. And so if we're talking about, Julian, the word of God and operating in the vein of Jesus, you actually, let me be real clear to all the folk out there who be like, ooh, you're married to a preacher and you got Christian books. Let me be real clear. You can be a follower of Jesus Christ and not call yourself a Christian. Because again, Jesus never called himself a Christian. That was created afterwards. And so when she's talking about in terms of, well, if I was in Africa, I'll be worshiping a tree. Well, what actually is she talking about? And what she is doing, she absolutely is playing on the ignorance of her audience, because many of these folks have never visited Africa, don't have passports, and have never actually studied, as Omakongo said, studied African religious traditions and customs. All she is throwing out is, oh, essentially, these just some crazy voodoo people.
And you know what? I come from crazy voodoo people. Look at my name, Malvo. Marie Laveau was a distant relative of mine. That means don't mess with me, y'all. But in any case, this notion of worshiping a tree, what's wrong with worshiping a tree? In worshiping a tree, you're worshiping nature. But I don't want to go off on that. Roland, this woman, like I said earlier, you do not have to go to, if you go to Florida, you don't have to go to Disneyland to find Goofy. It's Goofy right there. That woman is crazy. And here's the problem, though. The University of Florida has an excellent African-American Studies department. There are several HBCUs located in the state of Florida. Ron DeSantis, whatever he is, had to go and scrape the bottom of the barrel to find this papal spouting, nonsensical, ignorant woman who basically attempts to reduce Black culture and Black religion to worshiping a tree. She would want to find a tree to worship at, among other things. She might want to find whoever restores people who lost their good sense to it. She may need a little holy water and a little voodoo as well to restore her to where she needs to be. But that's a side point. The big point is DeSantis has resources, but he chooses not to use those resources because this has never been about education. This has been about him using Black people as a putting ball, if you will. Forgive the golf reference, but I'm not sure what to say. But using us to make inroads into the presidential race. He is basically pipping off of the orange man's racism to say, we won't teach right, we won't teach right, we won't teach right. The worst thing, I mean, I haven't read the whole thing, but the whole notion that people benefit from enslavement. Yeah, who? All of the United States. But even more than that, these were things they could use in later life. How many states outlawed the use of our tools? So you might have been a blacksmith in enslavement, but if you moved to the wrong county or community where there was a white blacksmith, you could be taken out. Your tools could be taken from you. So this is just nonsense, but we know it's nonsense. The question is not that it's nonsense, is what do we do about this nonsense? Because it is nonsense, but it's a nonsense that is a currency of the day.
Oh, absolutely. And I just need people to just really understand what we're dealing with here. And so I'm looking here because you have different folks out there who have been posting about this. Again, you have a Black member of this board, of this task force, who is highly critical of Vice President Kamala Harris by condemning what she said that she is absolutely wrong for what she said, saying she did not study any of this. She did not read any of these particular the particulars. We're talking about 191 pages of this, but overall, like, you can get caught up in this whole back and forth over this and that and here. But the most important thing that I need people to understand is that what you are seeing, and I'm gonna deal with this last round of comments from our panel before we go to the break. What we are witnessing, folks, we are witnessing how Republicans want to use education to now maintain the warped American history that we have always been subjected to. So really what they're angry about, Renita, and which is why they hate the 1619 Project, why they attach woke to everything, why they are just constantly criticizing any number of things. Really what this thing is about is they do not in any way want folk to be able to speak a level of truth to correct the lies that we have been told that have been perpetuated through the white American education system.
It's funny you brought up the 1619 Project, because that's exactly what I was thinking about. And I was thinking about that because what they are doing is a fool's errand. They are assuming that they can teach whatever they want to teach in schools, and that will change the thoughts and perceptions of the next generation about what white supremacy has been in this country. And that is dead wrong. No matter what is taught in the schools, you are still going to see, whether it be in culture or entertainment, you're going to see a full reckoning of history as it continues to grow. And the 1619 Project is a prime example. Hulu released the 1619 Project earlier this year so that in case people didn't read the 1619 Project, they could watch it on their TV, which we know a lot of people, more people are willing to do that than to actually read books, read articles and things like that. So this whole notion that Republicans are trying to erase Black people's true history, erase LGBTQ folks from this country, and all the things that they are trying to erase is really a fool's errand, because people are now more than ever wanting to know and understand the full history of this country, and they are dedicating themselves to educating themselves on this. And the last thing I'll say is, as we talked about around the Juneteenth holiday, it's important, again, in time to reinforce that Black families, I know we have a lot going on. People have got to feed their kids. They got to go to work. They got to take care of their families. But it is now more important than ever that we spend opportunities like Juneteenth and any time that we can educating our young ones about our history so that we cannot be easily turned around and dissuaded by what we see is now advancing in public education.
Congo.
State Rep Bernie Jack, who's one of the members of the 6 new appointees, has said that diversity and DEI has no place in K-12 education. These are the people that DeSantis has put into place. And before the new members of this board were selected, he already had his legislation, which led to administrators going into classrooms in places like Pensacola, Florida, and removing pictures of Obama and from the classroom, telling the teachers, I believe his name was James, that Michael James or something of the sort, that this is not age appropriate to have a picture of Obama up on your wall. And so when Ron DeSantis is asked about this and he says, well, I don't have anything to do with it. You're the one who wrote the law. You're the one who appointed the commission. You're the one who dictated what could be put in these schools. So going off of Anita's point, we have to stay active. Where are the teachers unions? When I was down in Florida working with teachers late last year, and many of them were so angry and frustrated and crying and scared, we got to take to the streets. There should be strikes that are happening. If people let them know. And also let's talk about what he did with the AP courses as well. So this is an ongoing process. People have to not just march with their tweets. They got to march with their feet. They got to shut this stuff down, because really at the end of the day, if we don't get out there and fight, then this is going to continue. And lastly, following up again on Renita's point, Sunday schools, everything we have to use in our communities, like members of our Jewish families do in our society, using school churches, using community centers as another place to start empowering our people, because we already know. I got a whole chapter on critical race theory in my book. I wish it was being taught in K-12 schools, because we already know we weren't getting enough Black history in school as it was. And now what little we were getting, they want to get rid of that. We got to reclaim it in all of the spaces that we own and occupy as we also fight this school system.
So obviously Representative Daniels, not happy with all this heat coming. She posted this on her Facebook page today. A statement from State Representative Kimberly Daniels on Black History Standards. I was appointed to the African American History Task Force by Florida Commissioner of Education, Manny Diaz. Of the meetings I attended, let me shrink this so y'all can see it. Of the meetings I attended, I never participated in any conversation about the state's Black history standards. In fact, I was never consulted about these standards. I disagree with and would have immediately challenged and resisted any notion that slavery was a benefit to African Americans. I'm a Black woman who was born in the early 1960s. I understand the atrocities of racial oppression and Jim Crow. I lived it. The thank God for slavery political ploy was taken out of context from a message I preached 15 years ago. The message was not about slavery, but about overcoming obstacles in life as a believer of Jesus Christ. Taking it out of that setting and putting it in any other context is simply slanderous. Please publish this message in full without paraphrasing or distorting its original message. Okay, Kim, but here's the whole deal, Kim. You said it. And the reality is, you were clear in what you said. Now, first and foremost, what you should do, because this is what I told Reverend Jeremiah Rice Church Trinity to do when they were attacking him when Obama was running, publish the whole sermon. But the reality is here, you said it. You said, thank God for slavery, because if not, I would be an African worshiping a tree. What's out of context? But that's neither here nor there. Julian, your comment about her statement saying, I ain't had nothing to do with this.
You know, this woman is hilarious. I mean, do they have a comedy network anymore? Because if they do, she should be on it. I guess I'm letting you know that I don't watch that stuff, but somebody should. Yeah, publish the sermon in its entirety. Make the connection between enslavement and a tree. Make the connection between the nonsense you said and the fact that you're on this commission. If you had been there, you would have said something. Well, you haven't said anything, lady. You haven't said a thing. You've allowed this nonsense about our people to go down, and you have basically implicitly endorsed that de-Satan man who said that there were some benefits to enslavement. So she has nothing to say. And then to have the temerity to publish at the bout of her stupid statement, don't take it out of context. Lady, you are out of context. There is no context for the kind of ignorance that you've been espouting. No context for you being on that commission. If you say you're a Black woman born in the early 60s, okay, I'm a Black woman born in the early 50s. All right? And let me make it clear to you, whatever you went through, you did not incorporate it. You were sitting here basically co-signing the devil under the rubric of the Lord Jesus Christ. Shame on you. And I'm not going to tell you where you're going, but you're probably going to find a lot of company there.